Well, hello. Again, my name is Maria Runyan. I am the Executive Director for At Home Living. Here with me today is Jen Anderson. Both of us are from At Home Living up in Duluth, Minnesota. So we're excited to be here. Thank you for the invitation. Jen and I together have over 30 years of experience working with people with disabilities. And I think that I can speak on behalf of both of us that for us it is more than just a job. It is a passion that we have to serve this population. And so to be here today and to be able to share our experiences with you, it truly is an honor. So again, thank you so much for having us. So like I said, At Home Living is based out of Duluth, Minnesota, and we primarily serve people with a brain injury or mental illness. We have a reputation for serving people who are difficult to serve. Maybe that's because they have challenging behaviors, maybe they've had multiple failed placements in the past, or potentially it could be because at some point in their life they received what I call a label. For example, what I mean by labels is we serve many people with SPMI, severe and persistent mental illness. We also serve people that are MIND, mentally ill and dangerous. We've served people who have murder convictions. And then, of course, we've served sex offenders, as is the reason that we're here today. So I want to start by kind of saying that Jen and I and our agency, we're not experts in the field. We aren't licensed sex therapists. We don't have any special credentials to serve this population. We just have some basic beliefs and some core values that I think is what has caused us to be successful in what we do. So for an example, we have a belief that everyone can be served with the right supports. That doesn't necessarily mean that At Home Living can serve everyone, but we do believe that everyone can be served with the right supports. And what is our responsibility then is to decide, can At Home Living provide those supports to this individual? And so we do that by just some very simple values in our initial screening process. We recognize that no two people are alike, and so we need to have an individualized plan of care. So we really take the time to get to know as much about that person before we look at serving them to make sure that it's going to be a good fit and that we're going to be able to provide their individual, meet their individual needs. Second is we have a belief that everyone deserves to be respected. One of the first things that we train our staff when they start with us is that to be successful in this field, you need to be able to develop a rapport with these individuals. To be able to influence others, you're only going to have that ability to influence if you have that relationship. And that relationship is built upon trust, honesty, that unconditional positive regard, and that's really where respect comes from. And we found that, when we provide them that respect, in turn, they're going to provide us that respect. And so that kind of meets our core value that everyone, whether it's the clients, whether it's our employees, deserves to be treated with respect. And then finally, not passing judgment. We definitely see that you have to have an open mind when looking at serving folks with challenging histories. I think most of us in this room, during the referral process, probably that first thing we do is read that documentation in the histories on someone. And one of our speakers this morning said, I don't read it. I meet the person first because sometimes I might get influenced based on what's on paper. And I think that is a really true statement and something that we need to keep in mind is that what's on paper is typically negative. And I get it. I understand that funding usually comes along with the needs and the services that an individual has. And to be able to justify that funding, it has to be documented. So the reports that you get are typically negative things. However, if you don't have that open mind in looking at potentially considering that person, if you close that book before you really get to know that person, or maybe trying to understand the hows or the whys, you've limited that opportunity for that person. And for us, I think understanding or trying to get some more insight into how or why they became in that situation can offer a lot. Maybe a person had an undiagnosed mental illness. Maybe they weren't on their medications at the time. Maybe they're under the influence of drugs. Maybe it's something that happened to them and it's all they knew. So there could be more to that individual's history that could explain why they may have that offense or why they were in that situation, that conviction occurred or so forth. So again, we feel that we really have to have that open mind in considering folks. I want to say that just because we're open to serving anyone doesn't mean that we minimize their behavior, that we minimize their history. We don't condone that behavior. I think there's that stigma out there, and probably on the flip side is we recognize even more so than ever to society and the general public that we have an obligation to everyone's health and safety. We need to assure the safety of the other residents that we serve. We have to assure the safety of our employees, the neighbors, just general people in public. And in doing that, what we look at is the environment and how can we minimize that risk from occurring. So we have this saying that we say, control the environment, not the individual. As we all know, you can't force anyone to do anything. So we don't put ourselves in that situation. We look at how can we proactively minimize risks from occurring. And it is one of the values that we take is that proactive, in the admission process. So I'll give you an example. In Minnesota, our most common, setting is a 4-bed adult foster care. That is where we have 4 people that live in a home, and then we staff it 24 hours a day. Now, because it's a relatively small setting, there is a lot of control that we have, within the environment. To start out, when we purchase that home, we have the choice of either purchasing it in town or out in the country. We found when serving folks with a sex offense that serving them out in the country is a lot easier to do. You don't have the schools, the parks, the child care centers, the multiple neighbors to raise, question, and so serving folks out in the country has been more successful for us. Then within the home, there's a lot of things that you can do to control the environment. If you look at your staffing, we have the choice of how many staff are there at a time. Maybe it's 1 staff for those 4 clients, maybe it's 2 staff. Sometimes we might even have 3 staff to provide that extra level of supervision and care. As a provider, we also have control over who we employ. In certain programs, if we want all males or all females, maybe the age of the employees, the training that we provide the staff. Those are all things that we can control within the environment. And we're constantly assessing our environment. I mean, with wage and hour, we can't necessarily say, no, we can't hire you because you're female and we don't want female, but we can look at where our strengths and where our weaknesses are with any program. And when we're developing an individualized plan of care for a referral, we can look at if the environment that we have is conducive to being a successful placement. And then finally, probably one of the most important things to consider when looking at an appropriate referral is housemates, looking at who is living together. When an individual is looking for a placement, they may have the ability to tour a number of different providers, but usually 100% never have the ability to choose who they live with. It's ultimately the agency, our responsibility to place people together that we think are going to be compatible. And I think, as Jen, might mention later on, is that we have found that placing other sex offenders together tends to be more successful. So, that is one thing that we have found to be easier. So as you'll, kind of hear that we put a lot of emphasis proactively before we accept a referral. We did provide, in your folders, there is a handout on our admission and our discharge. We have an operational manual for our employees, and so we just took those two sections out as a handout for your reference. So you will be able to read through that. But I think you will see that, again, in our consideration of serving a wide variety of individuals and those that may be sex offenders, that we really put that emphasis on the initial screening process and managing and controlling the environment as much as we can to minimize risks. So in our agency, Jen is one of the individuals that does that admission and screening process. And so she's going to share with you some of the steps that she takes when she is looking at a referral, some of the expectations she has for the team, and then looking at some of the training, and finally some stories of folks that we have served and lessons learned. So with that, I will turn it over to Jen.
As Maria said, my name is Jenny Anderson, and I'm the Director of Services for At Home Living. Maria's going to handle my PowerPoint, as I'm not the most comfortable with public speaking all the time, so I'm not sure if I could be able to multitask. I want to talk a little bit about our referral process. I receive all the referrals in our adult foster cares and independent living skills program, and our referrals come primarily from county case managers, probation officers, parole officers, and then for the Minnesota Department of Corrections, we receive referrals from the medical release planners. We've also received referrals from St. Peter, whether it's the nursing home or just their different variety of treatment programs. When talking with those individuals about the referrals that they're sending over, I want everyone's opinion and perspective, because the person from the Department of Corrections may have a different take on that individual versus their county case manager. So that gives me an opportunity to talk with everyone to get to better understand who that individual is and whether they feel their likeliness of reoffending or where their behaviors are. And unfortunately, there are in some cases where some people have not shared all the information with us. So that's my reasoning for talking with multiple individuals, because they know that some individuals are very difficult to place or find housing for. And so a lot of the times I'll get a phone call and people will say, I don't want to waste your time. Do you take sex offenders? And so, yes, but I want to know more about this person, and not only just their sex offense. So I request a variety of different records to review. I want to know specifically information on the offense. And as other people have shared, those aren't always the most pleasant things to read. But I want to know all the scary details. I want to know what that person is capable of doing. Also, I want to see what their incarceration progress notes. I want to know what a typical day incarcerated has been like this person over the years. How they've interacted with other people. Have they had to have seclusion? Have they had any altercations with the guards? I'm going to review the psychiatric assessments. I'm going to take a look at all the assessments that the sex offender programs put together. That is how I go into our development of our internal risk management. I want to look at historical information. I want to understand where the individual came from, what their family life was like, what the environment was in their family. I want to know what employment that they have participated in, what their offenses and arrests prior to this incarceration, what the history was there. I also want to know what the individual's interests are, because that is something that we're going to develop and grow on based on their individual plan. Can I have some of that water, please? Sorry. The other information I'm going to get is their medical conditions, their mobility, their ability to participate in activities of daily living, ADLs, their medications. I want to see that if their medications and their diagnoses, match up. If they have a mental illness, if they're a person who suffers from schizophrenia, are they on antipsychotropic medications? What has their symptoms been like with their delusions, hallucinations, voices, etc.? I want to know about behavioral reports, if they participate in self-injurious behaviors, if they could potentially be an elopement risk for us. I want to know what sort of sex offender treatment that they have participated in. Some individuals will come to us and they've had a very extensive treatment program. Other individuals have lower IQs, cognitive disabilities, that their sex offender treatment doesn't start until after they have been released. Also, I want to know what their conditions of their release are. A lot of times when we serve people with low IQ, cognitive disability, mental illness, we as the staff people have to help them make sure that they are meeting those conditions of their release, because they may not always be aware and have an understanding of what their responsibility is after they're released. It's very important that I arrange a face-to-face interview with the person, and then they also have to have a tour of our program. So I have a couple opportunities to be able to meet them, and in some cases have met people 4 or 5 different times prior to their admission. I do that because that's an opportunity for me to be able to see how stories have changed. They've had an opportunity to feel a little bit more comfortable with me, build a rapport, may feel comfortable with sharing a little bit more information that they might not have shared the first time. And it's also, I prefer to meet with those individuals one-on-one, because when there are, whether it's guards or there's other people that are of authority for them, they may, I guess for lack of a better word, not show always their true colors and not feel comfortable sharing all the details. I speak with them, most importantly, about the actual offense at hand, and usually in great detail, because I want to see what the person's reaction is. I want to know if they're remorseful. I want to know if there's any denial. I want to see if they're trying to minimize any of the concerns that were brought up, or if they're placing the blame elsewhere. I want to know where they are within their treatment and their recovery. Then moving on to the admission process, we have to do something what's called host county notification. And so we're currently serving Anoka, Lake, Washington, and St. Louis counties in Minnesota, and a lot of our referrals come from out of county. And so there is a process where case managers or that refer to a different county have to communicate to the county the individual that's looking to come into the county. They develop their own risk management plan for that, to be able to show that they're going to continue to provide support along the way, and then that person doesn't just become responsibility of that new county. And during that time too, those county case managers have to contact the case manager of the other clients living in our program and discuss compatibility. Also, from that, we develop a risk management plan that's an individual program risk, or individual abuse prevention plan, which is a risk management plan within our agency that is compiled from a variety of different resources, whether it's their sex offender treatment, psychiatric assessments, etc. We also will look at their supervision and safety expectations and the roles of their team members. Some people have their sex offender treatment therapist. We have their probation officer, their county case manager, the program coordinator, myself. We're all part of the team, and we need to identify whose roles and what each responsibility is. It's very important to have a good, strong, structured, solid team in place where that open communication and consistency and everyone's making those decisions together. Along the way, again, we identify an admission date, and also an individual has to have a physical completed. Now, with licensing for adult foster care, it has to be within 30 days of moving into the program or no later than 3 days after moving in. However, I always prefer to have that physical prior to their admission. That way, there isn't any surprises. I'm going to be aware of any communicable disease, any health issues that I guess weren't ever identified before. And that's so we can have all the supports in place to be able to successfully serve that individual. To continue with the admission process, if there is any communicable disease, we do have to request a variance and create an individual exposure safety plan for that individual and how we're going to minimize the risk of our staff, but then also the other clients living within the program. Make sure that we're transferring all the medication and medical equipment orders over to the local pharmacy. And just to make sure, and then we work, the next step is going towards working with training the staff. And this, Michelle had pointed out the personalities or the opinions of some of the staff, and I think it's a barrier at times. And so when we talk about the individual first, they are an individual first, they're a person, they may happen to have a mental illness, they may happen to have a brain injury, they may happen to have a low IQ, and they may also have had a sex offense. We look at identifying goals and progress being met from the minute that person walks in the door. To continue on with the admission process, the criminal activity and the history of the individual must be shared with the other individuals who occupy the home. Now, there is the exception for when communicating that to the people is not appropriate. So then, because of maybe their mental, emotional status, medical conditions, so then we provide that information to the next of kin, emergency contact, guardian. Then we do the coordination of transporting them and their personal effects. The Department of Corrections, they would provide all the transportation. St. Peter provides the transportation to our facility. The regional treatment centers, their protocol is to provide the transportation to the individual to our programs. Anyone who is outside of the facility, whether maybe they're at home, living with family, living independently in the community that's just not going very successfully, but no longer are supervised to that extent, I would then provide the transportation of those individuals to our program. Going to the day of admission, just to give you some idea of what a normal day of admission would be, right away, we start out with admission paperwork and reviewing the program rules and conditions of their release. It's always very important that from the moment that person walks in the door, and even prior to that we are letting them know that we are going to make sure that they're going to follow those conditions and that these are the program rules. And then you're going to continue to visit those every so often so that they don't lose sight of what it is their responsibility is. We do an inventory of the personal belongings. Now, that's not only just to make sure that there's no contraband, weapons, whatnot coming into our facility, but that's also to identify what the needs of the individual are. Because many times people will come to us and they will have had a pair of glasses that are 10 years old. They will only have one pair of socks. So that's an opportunity for us to look at the individual and see what it is that we need to how we need to care for them. Our RNs and trained staff provide all the medication setups. And then the individual must become familiar with their new environment and housemates. It's a completely different environment when you're going from an institution. You're going from locks and doors when you're going to a regular home setting. We have regular homes. This is their home environment. They're living with 3 other people. There's the majority of the time 2 staff on. It's a completely different environment. It can become very overwhelming. So we do have to make sure that the supervision and that it's very structured. The key to success with ongoing supports, key to success is having a very good support team. I generally will not accept a referral that does not have good supports in place because I'm going to look to them as a resource. I'm going to be expecting the parole officer, the sex offender treatment program, the case manager, we're all going to work together as a team because, again, like Maria had said, we're not the experts. We're just providing them community integration, teaching them those appropriate social skills, those independent living skills, and these are the people that I'm going to look at to help me get the resources that I need to make this person successful. During that time, we have a meeting initially after the person moves in with the entire support team. And during that time, we are going to identify the roles of the team and how frequently we're going to meet. And explaining to that individual that no decisions are made without the stamp of approval from the entire team. We're going to acknowledge the rules of the program and also the conditions of their release. We're going to go over again the supervision requirements. Any individual coming into our facility, it's a minimum that they are supervised 24 hours a day for the first 30 days. Any supervision outside of that that's allowed, whether it's 2 hours of alone time to go to their treatment program, is all decided upon by the team, and it's all something that is earned by the individual. And then most importantly is always making sure that there's goals in place, that the individual always has a prize, there's that carrot, there's always something that they're shooting for, whether it's obtaining employment, whether it's going to school, whether it's being able to go to their treatment program unsupervised. There's always something that they're trying to work towards. And then we identify any needs. Many individuals will come to us who have not had access to the best health care, have went without proper dentures. And so there as a team, we work together at getting that person finding their health care needs or accessible equipment, because that really does improve the quality of life. And can then, of course, has contributed to minimizing some of the behaviors. Staff training is very important. There's a variety of different trainings at home living that we provide. We provide certified therapeutic intervention, nonviolent crisis prevention. And this is teaching the staff on how to de-escalate behaviors, but how to, the precursors to behaviors so they don't turn into those escalation moments. That is nonviolent physical intervention that we provide. Person-centered planning. That's a particular favorite of mine because it looks at the individual first, asking who is that person that we serve and who are we in their life? What is our role as a staff person? And then what are we going to do together to achieve a better life for them, not now, but just in the future? Because if they could do it all on their own, we wouldn't be here. And then it's really important to balance out what is important to a person and what is important for a person and come to agreement of how we can balance it out so they could obtain both. And then, of course, we would identify any additional training outside of the agency that we were not able to provide, and that's where we rely really heavily on like forensic community support services, the sex offender treatment programs that we work with, to be able to come in and provide training to the staff that we were not able to provide ourselves. Some of the barriers that we run into would be, again, just the beliefs and opinions of the community. And then individuals who are not committed to their recovery. Unfortunately, we have had some offenders who were released, supervised release, who did end up going back and now being incarcerated because they weren't ready to work towards that recovery. And then again, like I had said, poor support teams. Making sure that everyone has a defined role and it's clearly spelled out what is expected of them. In at-home living, there's actually a correction. As I was sitting at the table, I was thinking about this. We serve 10 individuals right now with an offender status. And just to kind of give you an idea of the different individuals that we serve, we have a gentleman named Bob. He's a level 1 predatory offender. His victim was a 15-year-old female. He was directly referred to us from the Department of Corrections. He ended up staying a year past his sentence because he was unable to find a program within the community that would accept him. So he stayed at the prison for an additional year. And unfortunately, one day, unfortunately for him, well, he was released, but then had to return the very next day because the assisted living facility didn't realize that they had to communicate to all the individuals living in that program that he was an offender, and it just didn't go over very well. So he got to experience life outside of prison for less than 24 hours, and then was returned for another year before he came to our facility. He happens to be in a wheelchair and has some pretty significant health concerns. And since he's been out, he's been able to have a few surgeries that he's needed, and is going through a sex offender treatment program now because he wasn't able to do so successfully while incarcerated due to his low intelligence and cognitive abilities. And the 15-year-old female victim, as we had talked about the level and the type of offenses, it happened to be his 15-year-old daughter. And getting to know the individual and sitting down and having conversations with him and going through his treatment with him, it was later found out that he also was an individual who had been offended on. And so it just tells you that, again, sometimes it's created within that environment. And so really looking at who that person is. And at this time right now, he currently is following through with the conditions of his release, and has now reunited with his family, including the offender, or the person that he had offended on. We have an individual named Tim. He's a level 1, third degree criminal sexual conduct. He is mentally ill and dangerous. The Forensic Community Support Service will continue to follow him the remainder of his life. And he had forced sexual penetration on a developmentally disabled female. This female happened to be his girlfriend, who he had consensual sex with in the past. Tim has been with us for about 5-6 years now. And unfortunately, he has a medical condition. He has diabetes insipidus and has end-stage renal failure and is going through kidney dialysis. We're hoping to get Tim on the transplant list, but there's no assisted living facilities that would take him in the metro area where we live due to his sex offense history. We haven't had any concerns while Tom has been living with us for 5 or 6 years. Things, maybe he'd make an inappropriate comment every once in a while, but very easily redirected. He may do what, Michelle was talking about, the grooming, may try to touch somebody's hair. But once again, you have those boundaries in place where you let him know that that's just not appropriate. And then he will easily be redirected and be very remorseful and apologize for what he did. That has been pretty much the extent of any sort of reoffense. But it's really unfortunate that Tim was not able to become active on that transplant list because there was no facility that would accept him due to his sex offense history. And so we tried and we tried and we tried. And we had to do something internally as a provider and request a variance from another one of our counties to allow this individual to occupy a 5th bedroom, which we're only licensed for 4, so that we could provide him care in another area that we serve, because there was no place that would accept him so he could continue to remain on that transplant list. And I just thought, if this is my mission, is to be able to help him, have that transplant that he needs, and how sad if he were to expire with not finding a facility that would be able to accept him. And especially the fact that after having a kidney transplant, the likeliness of him reoffending is pretty low. Russ is a gentleman that I'm currently been working with for about 9 months now. He is level 2. He has an actual conviction of rape of a female staff. I've met this gentleman about 5 different times now. He unfortunately acquired a brain injury from being in a diabetic coma. So he's got some impulsivity, some lack of insight into his actions, doesn't always recognize the consequences of his decisions and the wrongdoings. And he was living in an independent living environment where he had 24-hour staff supervision, but it was an independent living apartment. And it was New Year's Eve, and the staff was watching Girls Gone Wild with him And if you're familiar with that, it's really not an appropriate show for a staff member to be watching with a gentleman with a brain injury who is very impulsive and has difficulty understanding the consequences of his actions. And so he acted upon what it was that he was seeing in That Girls Gone Wild, and then was convicted of rape, sentenced to prison, and now has went through all of his sex offender treatment and is having a very difficult time being placed in the community because of the fact that he has a sex offense history. And at this time, he's actually living independently with his mother. Well, he's living with his mother in the community, but for some reason we're having a difficult time having him live in a supervised environment. I guess I would so rather him be supervised than just living independently in the community. And then there is Justin, who had a first-degree criminal sexual conduct of a 4-year-old. The 4-year-old was his victim. And again, it has a lot to do with environment. He was 19 years old, was sharing a bed with a 4-year-old girl. And so just some family history, some dynamic there. And he unfortunately was one of the barriers where he's not ready to be able to commit to his recovery and accept responsibility for what it is that he's doing. And unfortunately went back and was incarcerated again for an additional 7 years. But what we do with those individuals, we allow them to be able to earn privileges and to be able to exercise some of that independence, but still live in a structured living environment. So you're not just going from being supervised to now you're just free to the community to make these choices without being taught how to appropriately communicate, have good social, healthy relationships with people, learn what is right and what is wrong. And so he would earn time, he would earn a cell phone, and then he was found to have started viewing pornography. That was a condition of his release. So he may have to go back and to county jail for some time as a consequence for his poor behavior. Then he decided to make some inappropriate comments to a girl while in the community. Again, we took back that being able to go to the gym. He couldn't go to the gym anymore because of that, and that was his second strike against him. Continued to maintain supervision, was getting to the point where he was ready to earn being able to be unsupervised and have a job in the community. And that is where he was found having a fake Facebook page, identifying himself as someone else to be able to find women in the community. And that was kind of looked at as more of a predatory offense. And so from there, they're saying that he had not learned, even though we tried to provide him that support and having him earn those things, being able to exercise some of the stuff that he has learned, but unfortunately was not ready. But two, being at only 22 years of age, his IQ is a lot lower. He's about 13 years old as far as where some of the other individuals would be comparable to. So that's just kind of some of the situations and individuals that we have provided services to within our programs. And does anyone have any questions?
What is your reimbursement rate? And are most of the, how many group homes do you have? And are they all only like 4 people group homes?
We have 15 corporate adult foster cares. They are all 4-bed settings. Then we also do have a 10-bed residential care board and lodge setting. We have our independent living services program where individuals live in their community and our staff provides services to them in their apartments. And then we also have a 38-bed assisted living facility. Maria can kind of go into detail about the different funding for each particular program, but the one thing that I like about the variety of different services that we provide is that we can continue to provide services to these individuals and knowing their histories and building those relationships, whether they get to the point where they come to our adult foster care and now they're able to exercise some of that and now they're in their own apartment and we're providing them services, or they're aging and then they can go to our assisted living facility and that we can provide services to them there because we know it's very difficult for individuals to find alternative placement due to their sexual offense history.
Is this on?
Okay. As far as the rates and the funding, the majority of the funding that we accept are state waivers. We have the CADI waiver, Community Alternatives for Disabled Individuals. We have the BI waiver, the brain injury waiver. Those are the two most common. And so based on the different setting, we have different rates. In our 4-bed, which is our most primary setting that we have a base rate of about $255 a day. And then based on the needs and based on the level of supervision, that may go up from there. Other questions?
Okay,
All right.
well, thank you guys
Thank you.
very much.
Thank you very much for having us.